Hey, friends, and welcome to Friends Talking Education. Please go out to podcast.apple.com and rate the show. Today, I have with me Anna Bilancioni, and she has been an educator for 11 years. Her degree is in elementary education from St. Leo University, and she is currently an instructional coach. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm excited to be here with you.
Wonderful. Today we will be talking about differentiation, that big word that everyone wants to do, but trying to figure out how to get it done is trying to figure out how to get it done.
It's scary. It's like one of those things that you always hear, and it's like that taboo word that like triggers something in teachers.
That is so true. But first, let's find out a little bit about why Anna got into education. So if you can tell us, what initiated your love for learning and education?
So, growing up, I was one of those weird kids who would be sad because I was sick and I couldn't go to school, or I'd be that kid who cried because it was summer vacation because I really liked school. I was one of those weird kids who really just loved school, loved learning, and loved being there. So, I was one of those people who I knew from the jump that I wanted to be a teacher, and I absolutely love being in the classroom. I love seeing kids learn, and I love building those relationships with students and teachers, and just being in that atmosphere is where I love to be.
How do you want teachers to view differentiation?
I want teachers to view differentiation as something that is natural. It's something that doesn't require a ton of extra work, but in little steps, you're going to see that it just has such a big payoff. So it's something worth doing because it makes a big difference.
Okay, so let's break down the word differentiation. When we're talking about differentiation, what exactly are we talking about?
Differentiation, I think, includes looking at the way students are learning and where they're at, and making changes to your lesson or your instruction to make sure that everybody is benefiting and getting something from the content.
Tell us, why does differentiation matter?
I think differentiation matters because it's a way of teaching to make sure that everybody's learning. I think too often teachers are stuck in this mindset that education and learning in school needs to look the same way it did when we were in school. And for some people, that's longer ago than, or it could be more recent. But I think that like that typical view of like whole group instruction, of students sitting and learning and being quiet and doing work, is what a lot of people think of school needing to be. And because of that, it becomes cumbersome, and it just isn't what learning is. The same way that like technology is changing and the world is changing, we need to change the way that school looks. And because of that, we need to think of a different way that we can help students grow and learn.
Okay, so let's talk about who benefits from this. Now, is it fair? Because most of us as teachers, we say it's not fair that you want me to write multiple lesson plans for all of the students that are in my classroom. So who actually benefits from differentiation, and will I end up writing multiple lesson plans?
I think that differentiation doesn't have to be writing multiple lesson plans. I think it's coming up with like a good plan for learners and then making changes so that it helps everybody. If you're planning, thinking of how you can make changes to help your other students learn too. I don't think it needs to be making a new lesson plan for every group of students that you have. I think it's about taking a solid plan and making subtle changes to help everybody in the class access the same information. I think that a lot of times teachers want to sit and do whole group instruction and do 30 minutes of whole group instruction. Then you check and you say, all right, kids, do you get it? And you're going to have some kids who get it, some kids who don't get it, and some kids who are like, am I at school today, that like completely don't understand. And then you want to keep talking for another 15 minutes. And the kids that got it are now bored. The kids who maybe kind of sort of got it, maybe they get it now. And the kids who didn't get it probably still don't get it. So by doing the same thing over and over again, you're not getting different results. So you have to do something different. And I think the word fair is really interesting because I think about what's fair for the students and what's best for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm focused on helping every student in my class learn and maybe not make, I'm not saying get everyone to grade level, because if you're behind, expecting you to show like 5 years growth in 1 year is a very high stretch. If I'm focused on everybody learning and growing, when I think of what's fair, I think of what's best for my students.
What does learning look like when you have differentiation in the classroom?
I think it depends on what you're differentiating. If you're differentiating the content or what the students are seeing, it could mean that students have different reading passages sitting in front of them if it's a reading classroom. Or maybe they have a different amount of problems. So maybe it looks something like that. Or if they have opportunity to access the information in different ways. Maybe some of them are looking at text, somebody is listening to something. I think that learning can look really differently depending on what you're differentiating. I think what it comes down to is that students are making sense of the content and applying it to what makes sense to them.
Are we talking station rotation, centers? Because as a middle school teacher, I don't quite get that concept of centers as an elementary teacher would.
Right. So I don't think it has to be center based. I think that if you're more comfortable with doing like independent work, you can still differentiate that. If you think about it, if I'm in a science classroom and I have the students working independently, I might have some students working with grade level text. I might have students that have grade level text, but they might have a list of words with the definition provided for them. So that way they have something that's just giving them additional support. It's creating that differentiation by giving students what they need to be successful.
What is the expectation for me as the teacher at the time that the students are working on all these different activities, and what would be my objective?
I think your goal as the teacher is to be a facilitator, which I know is another one of those like big buzzwords in education, but it's being present, monitoring your students, and being able to identify, engage with the students to see who's getting it and who needs additional support. If I see a student who needs that help, then I want to make sure that I'm having a conversation with them to guide them to where they need to get by asking questions and prompting them to think more about it. But I think it's really important that you're not taking over their learning experience, but really kind of trying to guide them through it. It could also look as if the teacher is having a group of students with them. If you know that there are a few students that really just after your whole group instruction, you checked for understanding and it didn't even seem like they were in the classroom that day, because that happens and it's okay. Pulling them and guiding them through that process, because if you already know that they need help, make sure that you're giving them that help again so that they have the tools they need to succeed.
I pull those students, we're sitting down and we're working together, and I just see that they're still not getting it. What do I do?
I think that if they're still not getting it, you try to explain it in a different way. I think it's okay to leave a class period knowing that someone didn't get it and then coming up with a plan to help them be successful later. Because if you're just sitting there explaining the same thing over and over again the same way, it's going to become frustrating for you, it's frustrating for the students, and it's taking that joy out of learning away. Sometimes you need to take a break from each other, and it's okay, and come back and revisit it another day. I think what's important is to know that the students didn't get it and then actively work towards helping them to get there. It might not be something that happens in one day, one class period, 1 week, but if you have a plan to help them be successful, I think that that's a good start.
And what are some tips you would give a first time teacher attempting to differentiate in their classroom?
I would tell them to start small. Start with one thing that you feel comfortable with and seeing how you can make those changes. I would also suggest looking at whatever resources you have to teach the standards and using that. A lot of times, your resources that you have, whether it be iReady, Go Math, Eureka Math, and whatever the district gives you to use, will have ideas in there for things that you can do for your students that are on grade level, above grade level, or below grade level. So sometimes taking those tools that you already have and seeing how you can integrate them will help you a lot.
And so you did mention a couple of the resources.
Mm-hmm.
What other resources to help me with understanding differentiation?
So I think it's really a great resource is to talk to the people around you. Find people who are doing things that are working for them and ask them how they do it. How do they plan for that differentiation and how can you use it in your classroom? There's also the teaching channel
Uh-huh.
another good resource because they have a lot of great videos of teachers that are doing things in their classroom. It's a really great place to start and get an idea of what you can do. With that, I think the videos are also shorter and giving it to you in a way that you can use.
A lot of teachers want to know I cannot differentiate in my classroom because I have to keep control.
I think that there's ways to let go and still be in control. If you want students to work independently because they have difficulty collaborating because they become off task, I think that you can give them variations of the same assignment. I think, especially if it's something that is reading based, you can often find articles that are the same content but different Lexile levels. Like if you're looking at News ELA or Common Lit, those are ones that will give you the article and then you can change the Lexile level. So it's really easy to print out those pages and share it with the students who need it at what level are getting it. And again, just kind of that scaffolding is going to help them to be successful. And I think that it's really easy to say that you can't, and it's really hard to try. So, having a conversation about how we can try to
Mm-hmm.
make those small steps. One thing that differentiation isn't is printing out the same worksheet on different colored paper, which I know is a joke that we've had before.
Right.
But thinking really about how are you changing what students are seeing and giving them tools to be successful. Because ideally, what you can do then is kind of pull back some of that support and you'll have given them strategies that they can use to continue growing.
Let's talk about some of the best practices that might translate across content areas. What about science and social studies?
I think with science and social studies, you're able to use a lot of those strategies from reading. That in those content areas, students are interacting with text a lot, whether it be reading from the textbook or some kind of articles. Usually they have some kind of print in front of them. So you can use some of those strategies from ELA to help with that also. So looking to give them support with front loading vocabulary that you know they're going to see.
Across content areas, we can present best practices. We're looking at differentiating the content, the process, and the product. So let's take a look at each one of those: the content, the process, and the product. And I want to begin with the process because sometimes that's the one that's the most difficult to comprehend. Like, what is the process?
The process, it's the way that students are going to learn the end goal. What do you want them to do in order to show that they know or they understand the concept? Process is how do they get there? With math, it's about there's 1,000 ways to solve the same addition problem. You could draw a picture, you could use counters, you could make tally marks, you could add in your head. Allowing students to solve in a way that makes sense to them, you want to be able to change that for them.
How do you differentiate the content if I'm allowing them to go through the process themselves, but I have this standard that I have to get them to master? How do I differentiate the content in order to get them to mastery of the standard?
Differentiating the content, able to give them tools that help them to succeed without doing the work for them. That with the content also, it's about finding something that is still on grade levels. It could be changing the lexile level of an article that the student is reading.
And then the product.
The product is having choice in what that outcome is. Having students make a PowerPoint to show their understanding, or they could write an essay, they could create a diagram, something that gives them the opportunity to show their understanding in a way that makes sense to them. That choice can be really powerful for students.
How do you translate your love of learning to others?
The way that I really work to share my love of learning is to build relationships. But by building a relationship, and I think you're able to share what you know and what you love, making sure that you take a personal interest in the student or in the teacher, and letting them know, even if you're coaching, that you're not far removed from what they're doing. You know that it's difficult. Acknowledge their struggle. Be willing to get in the trenches with them and help them with the hard work.
Well, thank you so much, Anna, for visiting with Friends Talking Education.
And thank you for having me.
And remember to remain RTL, ready to learn, love, and live life. Talk with you again soon, friend.